God does even in our doubt is he reassures us of his promises or his way or his will, even though we're like, God, I'm not sure what you're going to do or if I'm doing the right thing. He'll come in and give us his word or a word from somebody else or some kind of sign in some way to say, no, look, it's okay. You're going in the right direction. Keep on going. He brings us reassurance. And we're going to see that in Abraham today, where God addresses his doubt by bringing him reassurance or bringing him encouragement along the way in order to deal with it. Again, it's not like Abram doubts when he totally shouldn't doubt and God gets mad at him. God's long-suffering and loving, and he's patient, right? And so he brings Abram reassurance that God's promises are true and that he is going to fulfill what he said he's going to fulfill. So we want to learn more about who God is and how he works in our life. And so if you remember, 1 through 6 was God coming to Abram, basically going, don't be afraid. I'm your protection. I'm going to provide for you. And Abram kind of goes off over here and he's like, oh my gosh, God, what's going on? How come you haven't given me a son yet? Remember? God says, I'm your shield, I'm your protection. And Abram says, Lord, what will you give me seeing I go childless and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus? God, you promised me to make me a great nation. You promised me descendants that were greater than or more in number than the dust of the earth. And I don't have a son. And it's been 10 years since God made the promise. And he's Abram was at least 85 years old at that point. And so he's going, God, wait, come on. Please do something. And God calms him down. Remember, God said in verses 4 and 5, basically, Abram, it's going to be okay. Let me reaffirm my promise to you. God said, this one shall not be your heir, but one who will come from your own body shall be your heir. And then God brought him outside and said, look up at the stars. That's how many your descendants are going to be. If you can count those stars, your descendants are going to be that many. Or, Abram, even though you're older in life and you're past the age of childbearing and even your wife Sarai's barren and she can't have kids, even though all of that, God's still faithful and he's still going to fulfill the promise. And then we saw in verse 6, remember that was like the John 3:16 of the Old Testament. It said, and he believed in the Lord and he accounted it to him for righteousness. Or Abram believed and God counted it to him for righteousness. And so he had this victory over worry because God reassured him. Does he hold on to the victory? Not for long. Right? He goes right back to, hey, God, are you really going to do what you said you were going to do? Because I know he's like us, right? We kind of, our walk kind of goes like that. And God knows it, and he brings reassurance. So look with me, verse 7, Genesis 15. It says, then he said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to inherit it. Pause right there for just a second. I brought you out to give you the land to inherit it. So he's switching from you're going to have many descendants, or a son, and then descendants after that, to I'm going to give you this land. Descendants to land. They're both part of the Abrahamic covenant, right? He's going to make Abram a great nation. He's going to give him the promised land, which is the land of Israel right now. Actually, the land of Israel right now is only a small portion of the land that God promises Abram and his descendants, who today is the nation of Israel, or the Jewish people, right? That's who God's talking about. So the land that they're in today is only that much of the land that God actually promised him. I'm just going to read right now the second half of verse 18 in chapter 15. This is the end of chapter 15, but God promises them this much land in verse 18. He says, to your descendants I have given this land, look what he says, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates. And then he lists there's 10 people groups he lists after that to say, their territory too, that's the land I'm giving you. I'm going to bestow or grant you this land, Abram, to inherit it or to take possession of it. So, you guys, can you put that map up? Do we have the map? I showed this map a few times, or at least one other time, I should say. So this is the whole area today that God promises in verse 18 to give to Abram and the nation of Israel. Right, if you could see that little gray area right there, that's the nation of Israel today. Like, this is how much of it they have. But the red part are the borders for what God said they were going to have. Isn't that crazy? And they're trying to take land away from this part today. But God said, no, you're going to get this. And keep this in mind as well. So, river of Egypt to the Euphrates River, and then he gives them the other borders as well with the people groups in verse 19 of chapter 15. Abram has never possessed the promised land. Because Abram dies before the conquest, before Joshua goes in and starts to conquer the land, Abram dies before then. So he has never possessed the promised land. So keep that in mind. God is telling him in verse 7, I'm giving you the land. So he totally gives Abram's descendants the land. Back in chapter 13, verse 15, God says, for all the land which you see, I give to you and your descendants forever. So it's theirs forever. But note that. He gives it to Abraham, as well as the Jews. It's Abraham's land too. So has Abraham had ownership of the land yet ever in history? No, he hasn't. Because again, he dies before the conquest. So here's what I'm trying to say. If this is and we're going to see the confirmation of the Abrahamic covenant today, like God's given the covenant, but now he's going to stamp it and go, it's happening no matter what, stop doubting. It's going to happen. If he hasn't possessed the land yet, up until today in history, that means he must possess it in the future. He must take ownership of it in the future. Otherwise, God's not telling the truth. The only way you can, if Abraham doesn't possess it in the future sometimes, God's breaking his covenant. And today we're going to see God can't break his covenant. He's not a liar. So here's what I think happens is during the millennial reign of Jesus Christ, so after the 7-year tribulation period, the second coming of Jesus happens. He takes out the bad guys, the Antichrist and the false prophet. He takes care of those guys, and then he sets up his 1,000-year reign on this earth, where Jesus comes back and he rules and he reigns. And listen, just consider this, keep this in mind. Where does he come back to start the 1,000-year reign? Amen. Jerusalem, the Mount of Olives, Israel. Israel, listen, prophecy's all about Israel. All about Israel. Like, that's God's focus during the last time, because the 7-year tribulation period's all about Israel. It's part of the 70 weeks prophecy in Daniel chapter 9. In the 7 years, that's the final week that needs to be fulfilled in God's timetable for the Jewish people. And then after that, it's still about Israel, because that's where Jesus is going to rule and reign from. It's going to be amazing and awesome. So the things we're looking at way back thousands of years ago in Genesis here, they have relevance today and in the future because of God's plan for the future. So I believe the Bible lets us know that Abraham is going to possess the land during the 1,000-year reign of Christ. So the Old Testament saints come back at the end of the 7-year tribulation period. They get their resurrection bodies at the second coming of Jesus Christ. And I think that's when God gives all of the land that we saw up on the map, that whole part of the land goes to the Jews and Abraham as well. Like, he's going to, in some way, possess it or own it or inherit it then during the 1,000-year reign of Christ. 1,000-year reign of Christ, you can see that. I think it's in Revelation chapter 20. It talks about him ruling and reigning for 1,000 years, at least 6 times. So this is big because it points to that. So basically in verse 7, God is trying to let Abram know that he is in control, that he's going to keep his promise to give him the land no matter what. I think it's like he's going, because again it says, I am the Lord, I brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to inherit it. It's like God's going, Abraham, don't give up. Like, I brought you all this way. I brought you all the way from Ur to Canaan, to the promised land. think there's tough things are going to happen. It looks impossible still. Like if you're in Abraham's shoes in this setting and you're in the land, but there's still all these people in the land, like how are you going to convince them that God gave you the land? They're just going to kill you. They're like, hey, everybody, you guys move out now. Give me the deed to your house and all your land because God gave it to me. They're going to go, get out of here. Like, which God? Like, what are you talking about? And so it still looks impossible to Abram that he's going to possess the land. So I think God here in verse 7, one of the other things he's doing is going, Abram, don't give up. I didn't bring you this far for nothing. And I just want to pause on that for just a minute. Just because you're in a difficult place, that doesn't mean God's plan in your life isn't still going to happen. He's in a hard place. God's plan in his life is still going to happen. Or let me say this just for like a quick point of application. Keep going. Don't give up. Because you might be here in a place today where you're like, I'm done. I know what God wants me to do, but it's too hard. It's not worth it. Listen, hold on. God didn't bring you this far for nothing. And God didn't bring you and put you right here for this word right now for nothing. He wants you to receive it if that's you. Don't give up. I think that's one of Satan's greatest strategies is, listen, he wants us to give up before we see the fruit of what's actually happening. If you're following God's will, there's fruit happening. You might not be able to see it yet, but there is something good happening because you're doing what God wants you to do. Don't give up yet. Don't give up. And maybe these verses are for you. This is Galatians 6, 9, and 10. If this speaks to you right now, please write these verses down, remember them, read them later on today. Galatians 6, 9, and 10 on the screen. It says, and let us not grow weary, don't grow weary, while doing good. For in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. You guys don't lose heart. Verse 10, therefore as we have opportunity, let us do good to all, especially to those who are of the household of faith. Don't give up. Don't grow weary. Keep going forward. Okay, so God comes in. I'm the Lord. I'm the covenant-keeping God. I brought you out. I'm going to bring you into the land. Verses 8 through 11, look how Abram responds. Verse 8, it says, and he said, Lord God, how shall I know that I will inherit it? Or like, God, prove it, right? This is the doubt part. How shall I know that I will inherit it? Verse 9, so he said to him, bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. Then he brought all these to him and cut them in two down the middle and placed each piece opposite the other, but he did not cut the birds in two. And when the vultures came down on the carcasses, Abram drove them away. Pause right there. So in verse 8, he doubts, God, how will I know for sure that you're going to give me the land? Because right now, it doesn't look like you're going to give me the land. And then in verse 9, 10, 11, God starts to show him, here's how you know. I want to reassure you. This is how you know. So here's the first thing I want to pull out of this. It's that God addresses doubt with confirmation. Or when we doubt or when we have doubt about God's will or way or plan in our life, God oftentimes will confirm it through his word or through another person or through other things that happen. He'll confirm it just to go, look, don't doubt. It's okay. You're going the right way or you're doing what I want you to do. He'll bring confirmation. Even when he shouldn't sometimes. Because again, verse 8, he says, how will I know? Know literally means discern or find out. God, how am I going to be able to tell that you're telling me the truth? And I want to just kind of pause on that for a second, because if it's just like another if it's Abram's boss as a person dealing with Abram at this point, doesn't Abram deserve to get written up or cursed out, or maybe not cursed out, but like, I was trying to say something that came out as, okay, cursed out or something, and here's why I'm saying that, because he just did verse 6, which was awesome. It was like, okay, I'm not going to worry. It says, verse 6 again, he believed in the Lord and he accounted it to him for, God said, you're going to have a son from your own body, and Abram believed. And then right away he goes back to doubting. Shouldn't it be like, hey man, like, do you trust God or not? That's not what happens. And consider this. Up until this point, God has shown himself a bunch of times to be faithful to Abram. Like he already gave him that. So at least 3 times before this is the 4th time God has said, you're going to have land. Either you or your descendants are going to have land. This is the 4th time he's got to tell him. On top of that, God brought him from Ur of the Chaldeans all the way to the promised land, which that's a dangerous, difficult journey. God also rescued him from Pharaoh. Remember when Abram got himself into trouble and almost got his wife taken away? And how are they going to have the son of promise if that happens? It says, but the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues. So like God rescues him from that. What? God is faithful, even though Abram made a mistake. Then we just read a few weeks ago that God miraculously like gave Abram this victory over these powerful kings so he could rescue Lot and bring Lot back to where he was supposed to be. Like God is just going, I'm faithful, I'm faithful, I'm faithful. You're going to have the land, you're going to have the land, you're going to have the land. And Abram's like, but God, can you please prove that to me? Like, what? Like, we wouldn't do this, right? Like if you were in his shoes, you would trust God by faith without doubting, right? I mean, but honestly, isn't that what we do? Isn't God like, in our own life, that if you follow Christ, if you've been following for more than 5 minutes, isn't God like, look, I'm faithful, look at all these ways, every single day, I'm faithful, and we still get into situations and go, I don't know, are you going to do it again this time? And he's like, here's the thing. He doesn't really do that. He doesn't really go, Jason, why won't you believe me? Like, because if it was me to my kids, and they said, Dad, I don't know, can you prove to me that you're going to feed us again today? I'd be like, what? What do you, haven't I not fed you every single day since up until today of your life? Yeah, I would be kind of frustrated. Look at how God responds to Abram's doubt. Look what he says in verse 9. It says, so he said to him, Abram, oh my gosh, you're a fool. No, look, he said to him, look, bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, 3-year-old ram, and the birds. God's so patient and he's not at all like, come on, Abraham. He's like, Abraham, I love you. Let's do this thing that is going to confirm to you that I'm going to keep my promise. To me, this whole passage is God's grace and mercy and just he's so patient. So here's what's happening. When God says, bring me the heifer, the female goat, and the birds and the ram, he's telling Abram, let's do a blood covenant. That's right off the bat. Abram would have got that because of the culture of that time. At that time period, they did things called blood covenants, which, by the way, these were like the most serious covenants you could do, or this was the most serious contract you could make with someone. So with a lot of the royal land contracts, they would do blood covenants. So they would get a cow, they would kill the cow, they would cut it in half, right? Bloody and nasty, but this is what they would do. They would cut it in half, they would set one half of the cow over here, one half over here, and then whoever was making the agreement, right, we're going to trade this land or buy this land or whatever, they would both walk in between the pieces of the cow. And here's what it was saying, basically. They were saying we're binding ourselves to keep our covenant or our promises, or we're binding ourselves to what we agreed to with the land. And if we don't do it, we're going to end up like the cow. We're going to die. Like you can kill me if I don't keep my end of the bargain. That's in essence, that's the blood covenant that's happening. So God's going, Abram, I'm going to make sure you know that I'm not going to go back on my word. I'm going to be faithful. Let's do a blood covenant. It's because, again, the cost of it is your life if you break it. God's going, I'm not going to break it. You're going to get the land. Pretty much, Abram, I love you. Here's what I want to show you. Here's a example of blood covenant. This is Jeremiah 34, 18 through 20. So this is an example of this covenant happening, and then the people breaking it. They go back on their word, and God brings the punishment for them breaking the covenant. So they were in Israel. It was King Zedekiah, I believe, and they said, here's what we're going to do. Free all of the Hebrew captives. Like if you have any Hebrew slaves or servants, set them free. You need to set them free. And we're going to do a covenant saying you're going to set them free. So all the people agreed, okay, we'll set our Hebrew captives free. And they walked through the dead cow, and look what happens. And then they went back on it says they changed their mind and went back on their word and took them as slaves. But look what happens. Jeremiah 34, 18 through 20. 18 through 20. It says, and I will give the men who have transgressed my covenant, who have not performed the words of the covenant, which they made before me, when they cut the calf in two and passed between the parts of it, the princes of Judah, the princes of Jerusalem, the eunuchs, the priests, and all the people of the land who passed between the parts of the calf, I will give them into the hand of their enemies and into the hand of those who seek their life. Look at what God says. Their dead bodies shall be for meat for the birds of the heaven and the beasts of the earth. Why? Because they broke the blood covenant. And they knew the price was death, but they broke it anyways. It's a serious, serious covenant. In fact, I don't know if I just said this a minute ago, but it's the most serious covenant you can have. So God's using something Abram's familiar with to confirm the promise. God does that in our lives too, right? He confirms doubt. We have doubt, and God goes, here, let me show you, let me confirm it. You're going the right way. You're doing the right, through different things in our life, right? He brings us more reasons to believe. Sometimes, to me, a lot of times, it's a verse from the Bible. Like he'll confirm something through his word where you're like, well, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to do this. I think I am, but I'm not sure. And then you'll hear a verse and you'll kind of tell yourself in your head, no, that was just me. I just kind of made that up. And then you hear the same verse again, and then you hear it again, and then you hear it again. You're like, okay, all right, it's God. He's trying to tell me something. Right? I had that happen. I know a lot of you guys have had that happen. One time it was with something that I knew God wanted me to fast and pray about. And so the verse was, this kind only comes out by fasting and prayer. And I talked myself out of that being God telling me to, no, I don't, because I don't really want to fast and pray. I don't, and so I'm like, no, I mean, I know it's in the Bible, but it wasn't for me in that moment. And then I was talking to my friend on the phone, and I was telling him the situation. And he goes, I don't know, bro, this just came to my heart. Just take it or leave it. It just came out. And as soon as he started saying that, I'm like, I already know what he's going to say. I should have stopped him right there, but like, you're going to say, and it was the verse. And I was like, okay, God, that's what you want me to do. He confirms it, even though there's doubt there. Let me share this one as well. And some of you have heard this story 3 times. Just hang in there if you have. Others haven't heard it at all. But it was about, it's about God calling us to move this church to Belen from Albuquerque. And he confirmed that a bunch of ways, even though there was doubt. God said, this is what I want you to do. This is where I want you to go. So we started this church in Albuquerque. We were meeting at the YMCA for about 1.5 years in the Northeast Heights. And eventually God said, I have a building for you. It's in Belen. And I did the doubt. No, I just made that up. Said it again. I have a building for you. It's in Belen. I heard this during prayer time. It was an impression upon my heart. Okay, Lord, I'm not going to make you say it again. So I would drive around Belen and look for a building. Just pray and look and see, okay. Every time I could come, I would drive and pray and just kind of see. And at the same time calling, the realtors and doing hey, I'm going to pray and step and do stuff about it. Not just sit there, but do something. And so I was looking at different buildings. And one day we went and we looked at where the Beals building used to be in that shopping center over there off of Rankin. And again, I'm sorry if you've heard this a bunch of times, but we looked at the building. We're like, yeah, it's all right. Like, it would work for a church building if we built it out and stuff. And I just thought, man, and I said this out loud. Like, is this a waste of time? Are we supposed to come to Belen? Like, did I hear right? Or am I just wasting time driving down there, and it was me and David sitting in the car, and Adiana was a toddler at that time, and she was in the car seat in the back. And we just got out of the building. We're sitting in the parking lot, and David said, let's pray. It's like, all right, let's pray. Good idea. We prayed, God, please show us, if you want us to be here. And I can't remember if we said, give us a sign. I want to believe we said, I don't remember. Do you remember? Did we say sign? Okay, all right. God, give us a sign. Do you want us to be in Belen? Do you show us? Because if you don't, we won't go. If you do, we'll stay. And we go to pull out of the parking lot, and David goes, dude, look. And I stopped and looked, and he points up at the street sign, and it says Sunshine Road. I was like, no way. Okay, pause right there for a second. Rewind like 3 years from that moment. I did not want to name this church Sunshine Church. So about a year before we planted the church, maybe a little bit less than a year, I was praying in the living room and, okay, God, I know you called us to go plant a church. What do you want to call? I have all these names that I think are cool that I want to call the church, like Uprising Community Church or something. I don't know why I thought that was cool, but I had these names in my head, and he impressed upon my heart. He said, call it Sunshine Church. Sunshine Church. I'm like, sounds like a hippie. Like, I don't, no offense to hippies. No offense. I didn't like it at first. And right away he goes, whose church is it? And I was like, it's your church. Okay. I